This video will contain minor non-story spoilers for Silksong. Nothing beyond the first few areas will be shown on screen, and I won't talk about the story at all, but if you want to go in totally blind, this is your warning for that. I'll also have some more significant spoilers for Hollow Knight. Alright, everybody gone? Okay, good. Hollow Knight Silksong is finally out after nearly 7 years, and with it, we have storefront crashes, fan art, a new pet who we can't even pet, and most importantly, new discourse! Though, unlike most recent difficulty-based discourse like with Monster Hunter Wilds, or Monster Hunter Rise, or any Monster Hunter game, instead this time, the general consensus from disgruntled fans is that the game is too hard, not too easy. I've talked about difficulty and accessibility in the past, though not really on this channel yet, and I will be talking about it more in the near future. So I figured I'd dip my toes in and answer the question everybody's asking. Is Hollow Knight Silksong too hard? I'll take a moment to briefly address here that while I'm not the best Hollow Knight player, I do have every Steam achievement for the game, over 100 hours in it, and here's my Hall of Gods in my main file. I didn't go for all Radiance, but there are a few examples that show I'm at least competent in Hollow Knight. I'm gonna get skill issue comments regardless, but it's worth knowing this isn't my first rodeo. I know Silksong is a different game, but some skills do absolutely translate, like the general feel of recoil, pogoing, and parrying, and certain boss behaviors. Having knowledge of Hollow Knight does help you out, but it is worth knowing that Silksong is a very different game. It plays very differently thanks to Hornet's unique moveset, though some aspects of Hollow Knight's design like weapon recoil and pogoing still exist, though they're slightly altered from their iterations in Hollow Knight. But enough precedence. Let's get to the question everybody's been asking. Is Silksong too hard? Out the gate, I think Silksong is certainly harder than Hollow Knight by virtue of how Hornet plays. Hornet is much faster, and that's before her dash mechanic. Her down slash requires much more precision, her heal is faster, and it can even be used in the air, but costs the same amount of resource per mask healed, and she can only heal when at full. Getting hit while healing is much more punishing, she has a much larger hurt box, and her moveset can overall feel much more unbalanced, with each crest typically having a notable weak spot, like Reaper's up attack not having the best frontal coverage or Beast's down attack not being practical for platforming. Still, Hornet is notably more agile than the Knight, at least early on. She's a bit larger and the recoil on her needle is less impactful, but she can seamlessly weave in pogos and dash cancels to reposition very quickly. This game's combat is so good, you guys, oh my gods. However, I had a concern going into this game regarding the faster healing. I worried that because Hornet heals much faster than the Knight, healing 3 mass in the time it takes the Knight to heal 1, though the Knight can heal consecutive mass faster, it would mean enemy damage would be turned up to compensate. And if you followed this discourse at all, or played the game yourself, you'd know that this was absolutely the case. Double damage in Hollow Knight was pretty rare. When enemies did have it, it was normally reserved for the enemies much larger than the Knight or endgame bosses. I can count the number of bosses that do universal double damage for their attacks on one hand. Failed Champion, Enraged Guardian, Radiance, well, both forms, so if you want to count them separately, 2 hands, Nightmare King Grim, and Pure Vessel. If you didn't notice, one of these is a true final boss, and another is the Pantheon 4 final boss, and 2 others, again if you want to count Abstra as its own boss, are expansion final bosses. And the other 2 are enhanced versions of existing bosses. Well, 3 of them, I guess. Kind of 4? Hey wait, are all of them except Radiance harder versions of existing bosses? Edit. I forgot Trader Lord. Sorry. And when normal enemies did double damage, they were almost exclusively the largest enemy in their respective area. The giant city guards, the massive club husks in the crossroads, the metal-faced spiders in Deep Nest. The only real exceptions were enemies who exploded in these large infection clouds, but those are at least, you know, big explosions, usually with large visual or audio cues to give warning. Silksong generally follows this rule. Small enemies do 1 damage, big ones do 2. I'm somewhat against some of these enemies doing 2, like the big bell pole pilgrims or the big skull crawly guys. But all in all, I think the double damage enemies are generally okay. Even when medium enemies do 2 damage, it's often an attack that has a longer telegraph. What I'm a little less okay with is every boss attack doing 2 damage. I want you to imagine this. You're fighting the Bell Beast, and it jumps for the first time. This is your second boss fight, and it pulled a completely new move out against you here. You're used to jumping over its charges, so you jump right into it and 40% of your health is gone. This is one example. Basically every boss does 2 damage universally outside of projectiles, and Lace doesn't, but she's also much faster than the other bosses around this point, and she still does double damage on her parry counter and presumably her massive telegraph special attack. I don't know, I never got hit by it. What I find difficult about this in terms of balancing is that the bosses are sort of designed like Souls-like encounters, but attempting to learn these fights is often extremely punishing, since the first time you mess up, you are punished with, again, around 40% of your starting health being gone, or 33% if you have 6 masks by this point, which you won't for the Bell Beast, but you get the idea. The point being, you get punished very heavily for small mistakes, and that isn't to say that precision is bad. I think a lot of the problem that people have is more so with what happens when you die. You lose your rosaries. Rosaries are the game's primary currency, and the only way to get them back after death is to strike your cocoon that you leave behind, which means returning to the place you died. Notably, unlike the Shade and Hollow Knight, which serve the same purpose, your cocoon won't spawn in a convenient spot for ease of recollection. It appears exactly where you died, meaning if you die in a boss arena, you'll have to run back all the way and then trigger the boss fight, preventing you from just going and grinding to get stronger. Now, I won't just fault the game for being punishing after death. Plenty of Metroidvanias are, but when you combine that with enemies that punish you this harshly for attacks you didn't even know existed, it can get frustrating. At times it feels like the game is trying to test you on skills that you haven't really been given the time to develop, so the exam is given to you before the lesson itself. This is why most games will try to teach mechanics in a low-stakes environment beforehand and then test you in a higher-stakes environment later. This is at its absolute worst for the boss in the Blasted Steppes, who I won't be showing on screen at all for the sake of avoiding spoilers, but to briefly mention my issue, said boss not only does 2 damage universally unless you use a specific charm to take reduced damage from specific hitboxes, they also require you spend around a minute doing platforming just to reattempt the boss, and that's assuming you don't get hit by the double damage stage hazards or the enemies swarming the climb. It's not the hardest platforming in the game, but it's not the easiest either. I acknowledge that a fight can kind of lose tension if you can retry immediately after, but in a game that's trying to encourage you to be punished and learn from those mistakes, it feels like at times the difficulty and punishment for messing up are at odds with each other. Take Celeste for example. That game is all about learning from mistakes. In Celeste, dying is very common. You don't have health, everything is an insta-kill. But the game has very frequent checkpoints, as each room acts as a checkpoint, and the respawn time is very fast. You don't lose all that much progress for a mess up. Mess up enough on a platforming section in this game, have fun spending minutes getting back there. That's another thing, it's not just the enemies that do double damage, sometimes it's the stage hazards. Lava, worms, steam, moving spikes, you name it. It just might do 2 damage. This gets even worse when you realize you can get hit into them by enemies. Take 2 damage from an enemy attack and get knocked into a 2 damage stage hazard. Enjoy losing 80% of your health to a single slip up. The double damage conversation isn't necessarily new. Even in Hollow Knight, bosses that did universal double damage, while feeling a bit more impactful in my opinion, still met some complaints from some members of the community. Silksong ironically balanced this better later on, as more boss attacks started doing 1 damage to make the smaller attacks less punishing than the more telegraphed ones, in particular the boss in Bellheart. I think that really helps sell the impact of the bigger attacks. Double damage being scarce actually makes it feel more impactful when it's present. They feel a little too frequent. It was more isolated in the first game, whereas in Silksong, double damage is inescapable, and I really think it has no place in platforming obstacles, especially when areas like the Hunter's March reserved it for Big Tomato Man and the traps, and notably didn't do double damage with the thorns in the platforming sections. But a lot of this kind of avoids part of the question. Is Silksong hard? Yes. Is it too hard? Well, to be frank, that's less a conversation about difficulty and more about fairness. Do people think Silksong is fair? Do they make progress at a rate which feels acceptable? When they make mistakes, does it feel fair? Does the difficulty match our perceived idea of what is expected and how punishing the game is for not meeting the difficulty? Which is a much harder, even more subjective conversation, to be honest. There's not a clear-cut answer since everybody's experience and perception is going to be different, but damn it if I'm not going to try. I think Hollow Knight Silksong is fair overall, though I wouldn't mind it being toned down a little in some areas. Balancing Metroidvanias can be tough, especially non-linear ones, since it's hard to account for what tools a player will have at a given time. Take the Watcher Knights, for example. Often regarded as one of the harshest difficulty spikes in Hollow Knight, the Watcher Knights are often one of the toughest fights for newcomers, to the point where there's an environmental secret that makes the fight easier. However, all you get for beating them is one of the 3 unlocks for the final boss. It does basically nothing else. So nothing is stopping players from entering the fight with an endgame build, meant to take on the boss rush with every boss in the game, and stomping the Watchers into the dirt. This is why I usually think early game and end game are the hardest parts of non-linear games. The midsection tends to be easier as the world opens up and upgrades become more accessible, and endgame usually expects you to come in with your endgame gear, so it's fine with ramping up the difficulty. That didn't happen much with Silksong. It maintained its difficulty overall, which I appreciated, but I can see it being frustrating that you could do as much preparation as possible for a given point and still get 3-shot by a boss you've never seen and don't know the moveset of. For what the game wants to be though, I don't think Silksong is too hard. But that's my opinion as a veteran of Hollow Knight, and I'm sure you all have some thoughts, so let me know in the comments what you'd like to see changed in Silksong. But I'm not done yet. What, you thought it was going to be a Rover video without talking about discourse? Well, I don't think the game needs to be made easier, though some more frequent checkpoints wouldn't sting too much. I'm not disparaging anyone who thinks it should be easier, or people who think it should be harder. You should learn from this twitter.com, also gaming sphere in general. As per the usual, gamers are getting overzealous about their achievements in games and saying everyone who thinks the game should be easier, or even just people who want some accessibility options, are actually just a bunch of crybabies who can't handle an actually difficult game. Meanwhile, said gamers flood their basements with tears when someone releases a mod to remove double damage. The hate stems from people arguing that because it can be done and because it was made this way, it should be done this way. I have a bone to pick with that mentality. Just because a sizable chunk of the player base can pull it off doesn't mean everyone has to like it that way. I think a majority of the people complaining about double damage are fans of Hollow Knight. The friends that I've been discussing the game with the exception of one person, all played and loved Hollow Knight. And I think we all love Silksong too. One of my friends said after their first play session that it was simultaneously frustrating and fantastic, and that's how I would also describe Silksong. It's usually amazing, but there are plenty of moments of frustration, in ways I don't even think Hollow Knight had to this degree. That's fine for a sequel, especially one more focused on speed and combat than the first game, but I do think that if the conversation has gotten this massive, it can be toned down a little. And that isn't to say there aren't bad actors on both sides of the argument. I'm sure some of the people who have been complaining about the game being too hard have taken it up against fans of Silksong and even Team Cherry themselves. That kind of stuff happens with basically every discourse, so I want to make it clear that I don't want to pick a side here, so to speak. I think we should just keep the conversation civil and within its bounds, but I've seen a lot of people bashing those who want the game to be easier, to the point where even anti-modding sentiment is being spread and validated. I can't speak for them, but I'd like to imagine Team Cherry don't care if people want to mod their game to make it easier. If it's not hurting anyone, genuinely, why do some of y'all care? You're playing it how you want. Why do you need other people to go through the exact same experience? Maybe I don't spend times in fandoms like this, but I have never seen people be so vitriolic towards people just wanting a smoother ride. All it does is bring me back to the conversation of people not wanting other people to enjoy their game. I want to briefly go over a question I know I'd get asked here if I didn't bring it up. Is using mods to make the game easier cheating? My response to this question is always another question. Is this a competition? Are we in a multiplayer game? Is this a challenge run, a speed run, and the like? If the answer to all that is no, then I have another question. Who cares? I will never understand gamers being so prideful in playing hard single-player games that they feel the need to punch down on people who just want a smoother ride. The purpose of doing well in these games is not to beat other people, it's to best the game itself. So why are some of us so obsessed with insisting that not only did we do it the right way, but that other people need to do it too? Genuinely, what about someone else installing a mod that makes the game easier is impacting you at all? I don't get how people don't see the irony of making entire posts about how people are crying about difficulty when they can't see that discussion without, making a post bitching about it. There's nothing at stake here. It's a video game, a single player one. If someone was using mods during a speedrun, I would get the outage, but that isn't happening yet. People are just trying to have fun with the game. The discourse as a whole is around people just wanting to get through the game, so it getting this messy is absurd in my opinion. Unsurprisingly, difficulty discourse sucks again. People are getting overly prideful about pulling off some solid accomplishments and take that to mean everyone who doesn't like it should just get good. I, unsurprisingly, hate this mindset. If you saw my video on Friendslop, you know my outlook on this type of topic is, if it doesn't hurt anyone, who cares? I don't care if people use mods to make the game easier, or if they want the game to just be easier. I'm not insecure enough to need my video game achievements to speak for me, even though I tried to use my Hall of Gods record to deflect skill issue comments. I'm insecure for totally different reasons. I recognize some people don't like the difficulty, some people want to play Celeste with immortality, and that's fine. I can enjoy a good challenge, and they can enjoy enjoy a less stressful experience. More options is always better in my book. I've never understood the mindset that games should only have the one dev-intended way to play. There being an easy mode doesn't take away from the standard or hard modes, Fire Emblem fans. Geez, I'm throwing a lot of strays in this video. Let's wrap this up before I start getting as vitriolic as the people I'm making fun of. I don't think Silksong is too hard, but the community is split. I think the game could have done with more accessibility options, but really, what game couldn't? Besides Celeste, I guess. This is far from the type of thing where I would complain to Team Cherry directly, but I think that making accessibility mods is a great way to help ensure everyone enjoys Farloom the way they want to. And I think conversations about difficulty are really valuable, since it brings the discussion of fairness and how much difficulty impacts fun into question. This isn't the last time I'll talk about difficulty in video games, so if you want to hear my thoughts on the topic in more context, hit the subscribe button, and let me know in the comments what you think of Silksong's difficulty. Just keep it civil, y'all. See you all again soon! And without further ado, here's my roommate complaining about the game.
This game is dumb, and it's stupid, and it's dumb. Why does everything do 2 damage right off the bat? That's ridiculous. I have 5 health. That's hardly any room for error. Oh, you can heal quickly. No, I cannot. I am clearly not getting hits, and then any opportunity to heal just gets me hit. Why do hazards do 2 damage? Why am I getting killed by a boulder? A boulder into spikes. It's actually absurd. And then my roommate's like, oh, in Hollow Knight I can list the bosses that do double damage on one hit, and they're all final endgame bosses. Are you kidding me? Why am I getting roadblocked by a Mega Tomato? That guy isn't even supposed to be a boss. He doesn't even have a name. This entire thing is stupid, and it's dumb, and it's stupid. I'm not even being lulled into a false sense of security. Team Cherry wants to kill me. I can see it in their eyes with those stupid scissor bugs. Get out of here with your clock tower references. Why can they drill through the floor? Screw that. And the birds? My cousin is right to be afraid of birds because I hate these things. I'm about to pull a St. Jube and make these things my cliff racers. Why are the mice so aggressive? What did I even do? And it feels like I'm getting punished for not knowing a moveset they just gave me. Like, I don't even have time to adjust. They're like, okay, you get 2 bouncy things. Now if you mess up, you go into the spikes. Good luck with that. I'm just supposed to deal with that? Oh, get good. I just want to enjoy the game, which I am. But it sucks, and it's stupid, and it's dumb, and I hate it. It is a personal slight against me. I can see it. I can feel it. They made this game. They made everything 2 hit just to piss me off. Yeah, so anyway... yeah.